Public housing for white Americans became slums for black Americans. In the 1940s and 1950s, California suffered a housing shortage during World War II. Shipping jobs were numerous while housing was scarce. The Federal Housing Authority remedied the issue by constructing public housing. It was explicitly segregated. Federal financed homes in Richmond, California for black Americans was poorly constructed and intended to be temporary. It was located by railroad tracks and close to the shipbuilding area. For white defense workers, government housing was built further inland, closer to white residential areas, and some of it was sturdily constructed and permanent. Richmond had been overwhelmingly white before the war. The federal government decision to segregate public housing established segregated living patterns that persist to this day. Richmond police and housing authorities pressed the city's recreational department to forbid integrated activities. Black Americans were designated special hours to use. 20 projects with 24,000 units for both races still wasn't enough. For white workers, the government created a war guest program in which it leased rooms from white families so workers could move in as tenants. The government issued low interest loans for white homeowners to remodel and subdivide their residence. Rollingwood, a new Richmond suburb, was built. Feds approved bank loans to finance construction, requiring that none of Rollingwood's 700 homes be sold to black Americans. The government specified that Rollingwood homes have extra rooms with separate interests to accommodate white war workers. The federal government did little to alleviate the housing shortage for black Americans. The government financed whites to abandon temporary housing for permanent homes in the suburbs. Black Americans were left to their own devices. Some were fortunate enough to rent rooms from other black people who had small families. Others who didn't want to sleep in the fields exposed to the elements built their own cardboard homes, shacks, or they lived in barns. Black workers who earned steady wages at war industries saved to buy small plots in incorporated northern Richmond. The government refused to insure bank loans made to black Americans for housing. Standard construction was unaffordable. Some built their own dwellings with orange crates or scraps from the lumber yard or the shipyard. The United Services Organization maintained separate black and white clubs in Richmond for military personnel and also operated separate black and white travelers' aid services for newly arrived war workers. One occasion in 1943, the USO proposed a service center for black Americans on property that was available in a white neighborhood. Local newspapers, the Richmond Independent, protested. They began a petition drive in opposition to this plan. The city council prevented the plan from going forward. To ensure that no black American migrated to Richmond unless they were essential to the war effort, had a job, in other words. The city's police stopped black American men on the street, arrested them, jailed them if they couldn't prove that they had a job in the defense and also worked in that area. So, this is my commentary. When people, it burns my behind when I hear people say, especially white people, when they say, But things have changed. Things have gotten better, meaning for black people. And I always come back with the change got better for who? Because this was in 1943. And what the police did to black men then, they are still doing now. What the city council do in each major city across the nation, they interfere and they stop plans when it is specifically supposed to help us, but they'll help our counterpart. It's the same thing. And what's so sad is that this is 2023. And I guess I would have to be white to say that, to say I see changes, because, in their mind, it's like, wow, it is changes for you niggers, because it was a time that you guys couldn't do this, that, and the other. You couldn't even drink out of the same water fountain that we used to. You couldn't even sit in the same restaurants or go to the same hotels that we lived in. So in their mind, it changed. But in our mind, knowing what our grandparents and great grandparents and ancestors went through, the changes is like comparative to a drop in the bucket. Just something to think about. Have a great night, evening, afternoon.